Reaching a milestone. The Senate approves another judge appointment by President Donald Trump. We'll discuss the lasting impact. Destructive earthquake. An update on the deadly quake in Mexico as the Holy Father prays for the victims. First Amendment rights. The Department of Justice weighs in on whether officials in New York are favoring protests over religious services. And the beauty of faith. How a 14th century artist depicted the birth of St. John the Baptist. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, June 24th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. The Senate approves the nomination of a Mississippi judge to a federal appeals court. Corey Wilson becomes the 200th federal judge named by President Donald Trump and confirmed by the Republican-controlled chamber. It is the highest number of judicial nominees confirmed at this stage of a presidency in 4 decades. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, Tracy, Democrats oppose 49-year-old Corey Wilson for a variety of reasons, one of which for his supporting to overturn Roe versus Wade. But today was less about Wilson, the judge, and more about Wilson being the 200th judge to be nominated by President Trump and confirmed by Congress.
This is legacy stuff. This is generational stuff.
Judicial confirmations have been the focus of Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Our work with the administration to renew our federal courts is not a partisan or political victory. It's a victory for the rule of law and for the Constitution itself.
Much to the irritation of Democrats.
What we're putting on the bench is hard-right ideologues who will do damage to this country for a generation.
From his candidacy, Donald Trump focused on judges and sought advice from experts.
It was one of the major factors that got him elected and that kept the Senate in the GOP majorities.
It's the appellate courts that make the lifetime, permanent, generational decisions and policies that shape not just laws, but culture for decades to come.
Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein questioned Amy Barrett on her Catholic faith.
The dogma lives loudly within you, and that's of concern.
Despite President Trump's appointees, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh on the bench, the Supreme Court handed down 2 recent rulings on immigration and civil rights that disappointed some conservatives and the commander-in-chief. The president tweeted last Thursday, quote, "We need new justices of the Supreme Court." And Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network, says she's concerned.
Chief Justice Roberts, unfortunately, I think is politicizing the court by some of his actions because he seems to be making decisions with what appears to be one ear to the ground. Even good judges can make mistakes.
March for Life Action is praising the confirmation. They sent an email to EWTN stating, President Trump, working closely with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, has successfully reshaped the federal judiciary system in a positive way. Tracy?
Thank you so much, Eric. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. Thanks again, Eric. While U.S. Appeals Court is ordering a federal judge to drop the charges in the Michael Flynn case, President Donald Trump's former national security advisor pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, but agents hid information from his lawyers that showed he wasn't guilty. His trial has lasted for years. Last month, the Justice Department issued a motion to dismiss the charges, but the judge refused. In a 2-1 ruling today, a federal appeals court ordered the case against Flynn to be dropped. Helping the nation's most vulnerable, President Donald Trump signs an executive order to help thousands of foster children find and stay in permanent safe homes. And faith-based organizations will be playing a key role. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Well, President Trump's executive order helps kids find permanent homes. And tonight, faith plays a huge role. Outside the West Wing, at issue, foster kids.
This president wants to make things work for all children, all families, and he has given us the inspiration to do this adoption foster initiative.
And now an executive order aimed at improving the system.
It will first provide and encourage partnerships with faith-based groups, partnerships with nonprofits, partnerships with corporate, for-profit, and communities to help serve the people that need help.
The government says there are over 400,000 children in the foster care system. Each year, close to 20,000 age out without having a permanent family. Many end up homeless or in legal trouble. And it's faith-based organizations they are really relying on.
As a pro-life administration and a Catholic myself, I believe that Catholic charities, the Catholic churches are going to be very engaged in helping us find those forever homes.
Meanwhile, the pandemic. The White House is tracking a surge in cases. But there's optimism, too. Pro baseball is back. 60 games, but playing in empty ballparks.
Nobody is talking in some of these states about going into another economic lockdown and creating a pandemic within a pandemic.
And for the first time since coronavirus created a national emergency, President Trump welcomed a foreign leader to the White House. Polish President Duda is up for re-election in the predominantly Catholic country. He's been pushing for the U.S. to send more troops to Poland. The same subject came up last year when EWTN traveled with Vice President Mike Pence to Poland. Back to the executive order, the biggest challenge kids face in the foster system is that they move around too much, and it's traumatizing, and they're trying to reverse that. Tracy?
White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. Thank you so much, Owen. New COVID-19 cases in the U.S. are surging to the highest level in 2 months and are now back to where they were at the height of the pandemic. New cases have been surging for more than a week now after falling for the last month and a half. Hotspots like New York and New Jersey are doing better, but the virus is now hitting the South and West, with Arizona, California, and Texas reporting record spikes. With cases of COVID-19 continuing to rise here in the United States, the European Union is now considering a ban on Americans flying to Europe. Several EU countries are reopening borders next week. They are debating the exact criteria on whom should be allowed to travel to Europe starting July 1st. President Donald Trump banned Europeans from entering the U.S. back in March. North Korea's leader is suspending planned military action against South Korea today. The announcement on North Korean television this morning follows last week's statement from the North that relations with South Korea had ended. The suspension on military action is an apparent slowing of a campaign against South Korea amid stalled nuclear negotiations with the United States. Russia is celebrating the defeat of Nazi Germany with a military parade in Moscow's Red Square today. President Vladimir Putin remembered the sacrifices of Russian soldiers. The parade was delayed from May to today's 75th anniversary of troops returning home after the Nazi defeat. A powerful 7.4 earthquake hit southern Mexico yesterday, killing at least 6 people. Hundreds of buildings were damaged. The cleanup continues today after the quake struck the southern state of Oaxaca, but was felt as far away as Mexico City. The deaths were reported in isolated villages, and roads are still blocked, making it difficult for rescue workers to reach remote areas. Pope Francis says that he is praying for the victims and all those affected by the disaster. A new book examines nearly 24 cardinals who are best positioned to be the successor to Pope Francis. The Next Pope by Edward Patten of EWTN's National Catholic Register takes a closer look at the cardinals who could potentially take over the chair of St. Peter after Francis's pontificate. The book from Sophia Institute Press will be available in early August. And the author, Edward Patten, joins us now from Rome. Ed, welcome to the show, and congratulations on the book. That's wonderful.
Thank you, Tracy. Good to be with you.
Ed, why did you decide to write this book?
Well, I should say, first of all, Tracy, this is a collaborative effort. I actually joined the project later on. It was already in the works when I came. And it was really, the desire was to write it was really because of a sense of confusion among cardinals at the previous conclaves, that they don't really have enough information of the cardinal candidates to be pope. And this really aims to fill that gap, not just for the cardinals, but also for the lay faithful, and to really equip the cardinals with a full knowledge of the leading candidates going into a conclave, and for the faithful also to have a good idea of who could be the possible pope and who to pray for.
Ed, you list 19 cardinals that you think are most likely successors to Pope Francis. How did you determine that list?
Well, again, this was a collaborative effort. As I say, I came to it quite late, but I did have some input into who could be put on the list. And I think it really comes down to their reputations for sanctity, teaching, and governing. The book is really split up into 3 sections for each cardinal, and they are the sanctifying office of a bishop, his governing office, and his teaching office. These are the 3 offices of the episcopal of a bishop, rather. And so this was really the essence of the book, and really to give it a fully researched account of each cardinal. It's unlike a sort of journalistic interpretation. It's more scholarly and more like an encyclopedia, if you like, of each cardinal.
What do you think the reaction will be to your book, or what do you hope the reaction will be?
Well, so far from those who've read it has been very positive. They've called it an indispensable gift and a very thoroughly researched book, and they've been very pleased, and they think it's going to be a great service to the Church. Some have said that it's they're wondering why it's being produced now, and really there's no other reason than the fact that a conclave could be called at any time, but we won't have time to do all this research in a short notice that a conclave often has, which is usually about a month. So this was really done just in case there's a conclave, which could, as I say, could happen at any time, and it would then prepare the cardinals well enough in advance to know who to vote for.
Ed, you mentioned this book is a collaboration. Has anything like this been done before?
Well, funny enough, they did. I mean, this tradition actually goes back to the Middle Ages, when diplomats and reliable writers were actually given the task of doing this kind of thing. So it has a long pedigree, and so this is really nothing particularly new. And we've always seen, of course, journalists coming out with a sort of top 10 papabile. It's not really like that. It's more like those previous efforts to really help cardinals know who to vote for. So that's really the essence of the history of this.
Well, Ed, thanks so much for your time. And again, congratulations, Edward Patten, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thanks again, Ed.
Thank you, Tracy.
Coming up, the Department of Justice tells the mayor of New York City social distancing rules cannot favor protests over churches. And we hear from the acting head of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Religious Liberty. Police in Rhode Island have charged a man with vandalizing Providence College and assaulting a security guard at the Catholic school who tried to stop him. 26-year-old Kevion Gomera is facing 15 counts for painting swastikas and anti-Catholic language on gravestones at the Dominican College's cemetery. Britain is allowing public masses to resume on July 4th, and Cardinal Vincent Nichols is welcoming the decision. Nichols, the president of the Bishops' Conference in England and Wales, released a statement today saying, quote, "We are full of anticipation that we will be able again to take part together in the Eucharist, which lies at the center of our faith." The U.S. Department of Justice is telling the mayor of New York City that he cannot force churches to stay closed while allowing mass protests to continue. In a letter to Bill de Blasio, DOJ officials say the mayor's recent public statements have demonstrated a troubling preference for certain First Amendment rights over others. They say that they are glad the mayor is now allowing greater religious exercise and will continue to monitor New York City's reopening in order to make sure that the freedom of religion is treated the same as freedoms of speech and assembly. As we observe Religious Freedom Week, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is urging the faithful to pray, reflect, and take action on religious liberty here in this country and also abroad. Joining me now on Skype is Archbishop Thomas G. Wensky of the Archdiocese of Miami, acting chairman of the USCCB Committee for Religious Liberty. Your Excellency, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Well, I want to start out by talking about this year's theme for Religious Freedom Week. I know it's for the good of all. Tell us more about the meaning of that message and also its importance.
Well, religious freedom is the basic freedom. If you don't have religious freedom, all other freedoms disappear as well. So when religious freedom is respected, the common good of all people is advanced, and the flourishing of human society is made possible.
I know that you describe religious freedom as being under stress throughout the world. Can you explain what you meant by that? And also, why do you think that is the case, and what can we do to protect it?
Well, I think anybody that's looking at the newspaper or the TV programs can see that religious freedom is under stress in different ways. In the Western democracies, it's under stress, perhaps not as in a violent way as it is, for example, in the Middle East, where religious freedom is under great stress, and Christians, especially Catholics, are being driven out of their homelands because of religious persecution. Here in the United States and in Western democracies, we're subject to perhaps a soft despotism in which our religious freedom is ridiculed and undermined, and efforts are made to try to marginalize us, to remove us from the public square, and to participating, as is our right as citizens of this country.
How do you think this year's observance of Religious Freedom Week is helping to address these challenges?
Well, again, I think we have to raise the consciousness of our Catholic people to help them understand that religious freedom is our first freedom. And here in the United States, Catholics, we should have an appreciation of this, because thanks to the First Amendment, thanks to the healthy secularity of our constitutional order, Catholics have been able to prosper in the United States, despite the fact that for many, many years, Catholics were viewed with great suspicion by the majority Protestant population. And despite that suspicion, because of the First Amendment, we were able to build our schools, our parishes, our hospitals, our orphanages, and to really take our place in the civil life of this country. Catholics participated in the armed services. We defended our country in the war, and so we show that you can be a Catholic and a good citizen, and a good citizen and a good Catholic at the same time. So historically, Catholics should be very, very much aware of the blessings that the First Amendment of religious freedom have brought us, and we should seek to defend it for all people. And this week, we celebrate Religious Freedom Week, partly because of the feast days we celebrate during this week. Religious Freedom Week began with the feast of St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher, two martyrs, one a layman, one a bishop, who were martyred because of the despotism of the tyranny of King Henry VIII, who was trying to deny them the religious freedom of practicing their Catholic faith and remaining loyal to the Holy Father. Later on this week, we celebrate the Feast of the First Martyrs of Rome. And of course, Religious Freedom Week ends with the celebration of Saints Peter and Paul, two early martyrs of our faith in Rome. Peter, the successor, the first pope, if you will, and Paul, the great apostle to the Gentiles. But also today is the feast of the Nativity of John the Baptist. And lest we forget, John the Baptist was martyred because of his witness to the truth about marriage. What he was saying about marriage got King Henry's wife, if you will, in quotes, angry at him, and that's why he lost his head. So that this week gives us a lot to reflect upon prayerfully about religious freedom, and to understand that this is not just about a secular argument, but it's something very dear to our faith. Earlier during last week, I think it was, the Supreme Court made a decision that we don't agree with, because we think that in redefining the definition of sex, it's going to present some religious freedom issues, some conscience issues in the future. There's going to be a lot of unintended consequences, even though we would agree that nobody should be unjustly discriminated against because of their sexual orientation.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time today. Archbishop Thomas G. Wensky of the Archdiocese of Miami and acting chairman of the USCCB Committee for Religious Liberty. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Up next, Pope Francis tells the faithful there is a way to make sure we are never alone. Plus, celebrating the birth of St. John the Baptist. Pope Francis says that there is never a reason to fear as long as we bring everything to God in prayer.
La nobilità della preghiera ci lascia nelle mani di Dio.
At his weekly talk at the Vatican, the Holy Father says life sometimes takes us by surprise, but we will be okay if our daily routine includes prayer, because it is a time to talk with God, who's the companion on all of our journeys and helps us through every adversity if we ask. Today we celebrate the solemnity of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist, the prophet chosen to prepare the way for Jesus. Joining me now on Skype to help us examine this feast day through art is Jem Sullivan, author of The Beauty of Faith. Jem, welcome back. Great to see you.
Thank you, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
Jem, tell us about St. John the Baptist, whose birthday we celebrate today.
You know, the church celebrates the birthdays of Jesus, his Blessed Mother Mary, and St. John the Baptist, who is remembered on two feast days, his martyrdom and his birth, which is today's feast. And we first hear of John the Baptist when he's in the womb of his mother, Elizabeth, as she is welcoming Mary into her home. And sensing the presence of Jesus in the womb of his mother Mary, we are told that John the Baptist leaps for joy. And from that moment on, John the Baptist's entire life was a preparation for the coming of God into the world, into human history, in Jesus. And so John the Baptist is unique among the saints in that he was the forerunner of Christ, and his life was focused on a single mission, that was to prepare the way for and to point to Jesus, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world.
Jem, what do we see in this beautiful painting from the National Gallery of Art?
Sure, Tracy. You know, this 14th century painting is the work of the Italian artist Giovanni Baronzio. It was a part of a large altarpiece dedicated to John the Baptist. In this panel, the interior scene is set in a well-decorated room, and on the left side, we see the haloed figure of Saint Elizabeth. She's resting in a bed with two women who attend to her newborn son, John. And notice the unknown hidden figure looking into the room. Then as we move directly below them, we find the haloed figure of Zechariah, John's father, with a pen in his hand. And what is he doing? He's writing his son's name in large letters on a scroll. The artist has captured that dramatic gospel moment when Zechariah recovers his speech that was lost when he doubted the angel's message that he and Elizabeth would have a child. So these were the miraculous events around the birth of John the Baptist, who was set apart from the womb to prepare the way of the Lord.
And Jem, what can we take away from this 14th century image?
At the beginning of Jesus' public ministry, John the Baptist baptizes Jesus in the Jordan. And throughout Jesus' earthly life, John the Baptist was an evangelist, a preacher, announcing the good news of the way of the Lord. And so reflecting on his birth today, we are reminded that our words and actions can also prepare hearts and minds to encounter the Lord Jesus and to grow in faith. By the example and witness of our life, we too prepare the way of the Lord so that others come to the love of God revealed in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus.
Oh, Jem, thank you so much for sharing this beautiful painting with us. We really appreciate it. Jem Sullivan, author of The Beauty of Faith. Thank you again, Jem.
Thank you, Tracy.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.